today, and we're going to hear quite a bit from him, but we're not going to introduce him just yet. First, I want to remind everyone that our next event is going to be March 4th. That's going to be Patricia Richards, and she's going to be speaking on recollections of violence and survival in the life histories of Mapuche women elders. That's coming from, I think, southern Chile. And I also want to let everyone know that after our discussion and question and answers here, you'll all be invited sometime around 5 o'clock to go upstairs to the 9th floor where we have some refreshments. And everybody here is welcome and invited, and it's a really nice chance to get to talk to Center Fellows, to Stephen himself, to other people interested in this. Today we're going to have a little bit different focus than we often do. Usually you get to hear philosophical, theoretical stuff at C21 events. And we're going to have a slightly different focus looking at fiction today, although Stephen does an excellent discussion of the very nature of genre, which those of us who were at the noon brown bag got to hear some of. But Jeremy Carnes is actually going to be introducing and welcoming Stephen. So, Jeremy.
Well, so I got asked to do this, and I was trying to think of, like, what sorts of things would I say about someone like Stephen, whose work is just kind of like, well, and I'll just let this other person say it for me because I couldn't figure out how to say it. So this sounds better. And Kim actually gave me this article, and I think it hits the point right on the nose. The article starts off, Stephen Graham Jones may be the best prolific writer you haven't heard of yet. Partly because his specialty is literary horror, and partly because, despite having a specialty, he's quick to switch genres and hard to pin down. And I think that kind of sums up Stephen's work kind of really well, and just the way that it's really hard to figure out what's happening in his novels is really, it always makes reading very interesting. Stephen is the author of 20 book-length works, or that might be more than 20 now. It's hard to keep track. There are a lot of them. His most recent being After the People Lights Have Gone Off. He's also published his story Grindstone in Ellen Datlow's collection, The Monstrous. He's a major proponent of genre fiction, although, like we said, always kind of subverting our expectations within that genre fiction. Stephen is a Blackfeet Native American writer. In an interview with Buffalo Almanac in 2014, he says about his Native identity, I just don't think about it. If I did, I'm afraid everything would blow up on the page, so I just figure I'm Blackfeet. Whatever I do is going to be Blackfeet, and then try hard to write exactly the book I'd most like to read. The American Indian Studies program here at UWM wanted to give you some gifts, Stephen, just in welcoming you and making your way here. So we have for you a shirt with Milwaukee and our panther with hello written in local native languages on that. And then we also have, from the American Indian Studies program, a pen and, I'm going to unfold this here, a bandana. So all of this for you. We just want to thank you for being here, miigwech, and please welcome me in joining Stephen Graham Jones.
Is this tall enough? Y'all can hear me? You can't hear me. Maybe I'll be shorter. Can you hear me better like this? Thank y'all for this cool stuff. I always need pens. My whole life I need pens. I never feel so naked as when I leave the house and I realize 2 miles into wherever I'm going that I don't have a pen. That's the worst feeling in the world, you know. Almost as bad as not having a book, you know. That terrifies me kind of fundamentally too. And I'm glad I wore a black shirt today, or else I'd look like that's my only nice clothes I got. But y'all know this without me telling you, but it's really cold here in Wisconsin. my bus driver taking me to the airport in Denver was wearing shorts, you know? All right, I'll read to y'all for, I don't know, 45 minutes, an hour or something. And then if y'all want to ask questions, I'm definitely here to answer. Hopefully you do think of some questions. I'll try to read some stuff to provoke some questions. I guess if y'all want to ask questions, then you have to listen to me up here asking myself questions, and that gets ugly really fast. We don't want to get involved in that, I don't think. So let's jump into it. How about I'll read y'all a little bitty short piece. I write a lot of pieces that are this short. Actually, I've got a whole book of them. I got 50 of them in this book, but it's just a really comfortable length for me to write at. I mean, I do a lot of novels too, but I really like these short pieces. The only bad thing about these short pieces is they don't make money. You know, novels make money, but if you write like 150 words that are perfect, people will be like, yeah, that's great, but they don't pay you much for it, you know, which isn't always great. I read at a podium like this somewhere once to a big auditorium, and it was not only a monitor up here, but a camera too that was looking right at me, and the camera was putting my face up here, and also it was putting my face down here, so I was having to like critique and watch myself as I read. It was really, really disorienting. I'm glad that's not happening here. Thank you. All right. Truth is a bearded lady. My husband has two hearts. He told me. When he was a kid, sideshow people were always lurking around to kidnap him into the carnival, but he got away each time, just barely. If he hadn't, we wouldn't be together right now. But he only tells me about his second heart. His other wife thinks he's like everybody else. She thinks he just has one heart, can just love one woman. I know the truth, though. He trusts me with all his secrets. If either of his hearts is bigger, then it's the one he's given me. I wrote that one night during a commercial. I wrote it on my phone, and because I was having an argument with my kids. We were watching Star Trek Next Generation. You know Star Trek Next Generation, okay? And Data was like beating up Worf or something, because everybody beats up Worf, you know? And I got in an argument with my kids about whether Data would win in a fight or whether Doctor Who would. And I thought I had a really good grounding to win this argument, because Data's an android, and he's got these super muscles, and he's so fast. But then they pulled out their ace in the hole that Doctor Who has two hearts, and that just stopped me, because I thought, how can he beat a dude with two hearts? I don't watch Doctor Who. I don't understand what he needs two hearts for, but it must help him. I don't know. How about I'll read y'all a piece from this little book. Yeah, I'll read you. This is a story I wrote. I was up at school in my office one day. This is early in my teaching career, I guess. I wrote this story anyways. And a grad student came to my office, and he asked me, he said, so I'm going to do a novel for my thesis, or my dissertation, I guess it was. He said, so I was just wondering, how do you write a novel? And I was like, a big question, you know? I could not wrap my head around an answer. I mean, I told him all the pitfalls, not all the pitfalls, because there's an endless list of pitfalls, but I told him some of the pitfalls involved with writing a novel, and the whole thing, and then I wasn't quite satisfied with it, so I sat down and wrote this piece, which I need glasses for. This book is really neat. It's little. I can carry it in my pocket, but also I have to be like a mouse to read the font. It's so little. All right, so this is what I wrote in late answer to that student. This is the title. The sheep you shear will turn out to have been koala bears all along, or How to Write a Novel. 1. For no reason at all, Jenner is paranoid that one of his chickens is carrying an egg that, if hatched, could resemble him. 2. Lexi lives at the corner and, if left alone in a closet, can open a bottle of beer with the back of her knee. 3. Davis wears glasses he found on the side of the road. A dead lady had them half on. Nobody had found her then. Now he can't see without them. 4. Where a speck of meteor falls, a mushroom will grow, with a cap like an ear. For this reason, Carrie has always been tight-lipped around mushrooms. 5. One Friday night, Maxwell learned to drink the syrup of his father's dreams. His father woke blank-faced and went through the motions of pancakes, but in the living room, nobody ate them. 6. With the dead lady's glasses, Davis claims to be able to see Lexi in the closet, but really he's seeing the last time she opened the beers, or the next. The shadowy outline of her skirt is different. 7. Carrie sometimes lures Lexi out to the woods to get her to tell secrets. Lexi just whispers and whispers and never looks at the ground by her feet. 8. Maxwell's father and Maxwell's mother wrecked off the side of the road one night. Maxwell's father walked in a daze through the woods until the deputies found him. Davis's mom had a bird sitting on her face when they found her, and no glasses. 9. The only love note Carrie's written so far, she left a line at the top for the name to go, because she wants to be ready. Some of the X's and O's at the bottom of the page have been erased, then written again, then erased again. 10. The back of Lexi's knee is ridged with scars, like letters all written in one place. All the secrets she knows have to do with Jenner, who lives next door. She sometimes sees him scurrying. 11. Pancakes occasionally show up on the floor of the attic over Maxwell's living room. Before they can cool, the raccoons are on them. They have hands like people and masks like people, but they don't know regret, so we're just animals. 12. For show and tell, Jenner brings his favorite chicken to class. When Davis walks in, he looks into the chicken from the side and then up into Jenner, studying the line of his jaw, and then he looks as far away as he can for the rest of class. Carrie writes his name on a line and then cups her hand over it to keep it there. Which I know probably didn't actually tell you how to write a novel. I don't know if it told me either. This one. I'll read the story. I'll read you the story, then I'll tell you the story of the story. Oh no, it got shorter. Hold on. All right. This is called Lunch. The girl I trade jokes with at the cafeteria I eat at on Mondays has a new one for me this time. Her son is going to live with his grandmother for a while. I ask her why. We're laughing in our way. Her filling tea glasses, me sliding 2 pieces of pie onto one saucer like they let me do. And she says she's sending him to her mother's because this morning when she went in to wake him for school, his breath was white because she doesn't have a heater in her house. But her mother does, one of those big ones that shoots heat up through a vent in the living room. And then she nods for me to take my pie, that it's okay. At one point, a few minutes later, eating whatever I'm eating, I see a guy about 25 stand up from his table, then pull his dad. I think it's his dad anyway, but it could be a boss, I guess. But what the guy does is pull him up from his plate and arrange him into the very specific shape he needs him to be in to properly show this complicated karate move he saw on a show last night, or just thought of maybe. Either way, his face when he slow motions through the move is deadly serious. And he does the sound effects too, or holds his lips like he's making the sounds. And I look away, want to fall in love with something, the first thing I see, but close my eyes instead. Know that next week and the week after, I'll be eating in a different place. That story, so many of the stories I write, they're just stories that happened, and I either don't change the names or I kind of just don't say the name and I pretend it's fiction. I'm sure a lot of writers do that. This one, I remember after eating at this place, it was Furr's Cafeteria, if you know Furr's down in the south. I remember I left the place and I'm sitting there at the light to get back on the big street, and there's 2 of those dudes, those Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, who wear the white shirts and go door to door, and they're on their bikes riding across the street to the next place, and they're going in front of a mall right then, and it was like one of the happiest things I'd ever seen, because the first guy is just plugging along, going to the next place, and the guy behind him is trying so hard to do a wheelie, and it made me so intensely happy to see that guy trying to do a wheelie. Oh, and also right in that same place, about a year after this, I got rear-ended by someone, and it was like a big wreck. A lot of people all stacked up and everything. Nobody got hurt. But what I remember is the girl who had hit me, she jumps out of her car and she's just running around all in the street like scared or nervous or something. But all she keeps screaming is that her bra broke, And it was the weirdest thing. Like if I wrote that in a story, nobody would believe it, you know? I don't know. How about, I wrote this story. This is called Bestiary. I wrote it because I was having a discussion with someone about nonfiction, because nonfiction has always been a mystery to me. I don't understand it. I like to read it a lot. I don't know how to write it. And I finally came down to wondering whether maybe nonfiction is just what you do where you don't lie, you know? Like maybe that's what nonfiction is. It's not lies. Like that's what distinguishes it from fiction. So thinking, I thought I'd use that as a guiding principle or something. Don't lie, which I guess is a good principle for life too. But and I wrote this little piece. The screen just came alive up here. It's kind of scary. Bestiary. I grew up in a land shaped by animals. The first bird I shot in a buffalo wallow. There would be countless more. Owls and ducks flying away with my pellet gun pellets lodged in them. Doves I wouldn't learn to clean and eat for years. The blood on their yellow breasts like a dab of jelly on butter toast. Quail that were beautiful and pliant in my hand. Scissor tails that fell in looping arcs, their tails disappointing up close. Mounds of red and white and black woodpeckers my grandmother would point out for me that, even with their bodies full of birdshot, still needed to be chased down in the tall grass. Once, on accident, a mockingbird that wanted to put me away, take away my gun. The hole I dug to hide it in was deep. There would be more. A bullbat, just to see if I could. A compact little hawk of a kind I've never seen again. I buried it, too. Then took 3 steps away, found a pair of rattlesnakes mating and watched them until they saw me and tried to break apart. Couldn't. Hours later, skinless, headless, no guts, they still rose from the pan of grease I was cooking them in, struck at me with their blunt necks. Another time I walked onto a pair of sand rattlesnakes, never knew how purple and pink their belly skin was until they were dead. That same year, a normal rattlesnake pulled at my leg, but couldn't get through. My pants leg, but couldn't get through. I killed it for so long that the venom got in my arm, swelled it from wrist to elbow. Days after that, just to see if it was a thing I could do, or to see if it was something I shouldn't do, maybe, I got down on my knees before a rattlesnake and we stared at each other for half an hour until it started striking. And I started trying to tap it on the head with my ball-peen hammer. I buried it in a deep, deep hole with an owl I'd killed that same day. Then, to keep them there, upended a 55-gallon drum, drove it down around the owl and the snake until it was level with the ground, told myself it was over now, me, them, that I was sorry and it was over. I was wrong. Later that year, I would stand in the brake lights of the pickup truck and help beat rabbits' heads against the bumper because they weren't dead enough yet, then throw them into the pile already, spilling over the bed rails. Because it was summer, we couldn't eat the rabbits, had to throw them into a pit for the coyotes. Later, in the snow, with slide-action rifles that felt so much like the air pumps on my pellet guns, I would run down elk and mule deer and whitetail from the dancing beds of trucks, shoot prairie dogs to sight my gun in, look through my scope one afternoon at what should have been a cow moose 30 yards out, broadside, but instead stood into a cinnamon grizzly, her 2 cubs tumbling into view. That time, my uncle guided the barrel of my gun down for me and kept it there. And I looked over the top of my scope at the mother bear and wondered where my uncle had been 3 years ago in my buffalo wallow when, out of birds but not daylight, I'd aimed for too long straight up into a power line and hit it, then felt the small slug immediately in the ground on my left foot instead of the bones of my face. I dug the slug out. It was shaped like a mushroom, still hugging the power line, and I did any of 1,000 things with it then, I suppose, none of them right. I wrote a second part to that piece too. What was it called? I don't know what it's called, but it was about all the dogs I'd had that have met bad ends. But then I read it and it was too sad, so I never sent it out. You don't have rattlesnakes up here, do you? Oh, it must be nice. What do y'all have? What do y'all have that wants to kill you? Ice.
Governor.
Governors. You know, when I got that venom in my arm, I didn't want to go to the doctor, so it was August, so I put on my winter jacket and I wore it for like 10 days in August in Texas, so my mom wouldn't see my arm, you know, because it was all swelled up and ugly. Had a similar thing happen actually. I was out disking a field, which is where you like the field's been not used for 6 or 8 years, so it's all kind of grown over, and you go disc it up just to turn everything upside down. And when you do that, you scare up all the little rodents, and the hawks all start following the tractor, and they just feed and feast, you know. And you watch enough little baby rabbits die, and you think, I'm going to save one, you know. And so I went out and saved like what I would judge to be a teenage rabbit, anyways, and because it definitely wasn't quite full grown. And I took it home, and this was we were having the bubonic plague come through West Texas at the time, so everybody was supposed to not be playing with the rabbits, but I thought this rabbit was going to be okay, you know. And so I took it back to our trailer, and I let it live in secret in mine and my brother's bathroom. And I brought it like grass and bugs, because I don't know what rabbits eat, you know. But and then I went in there to pet it, because I thought it was going to be my friend, and we were going to have great adventures. And sure enough, man, that thing chomped on my hand. Like, I thought it didn't go all the way through, but it went deep. Those rabbits have some serious teeth, you know. And that sucked. And then so I went to bed, and my hand all hurt. And then I woke up the next morning, and my rabbit was dead, you know. And I thought, oh man, I've got bubonic plague now. I'm going to kill the world with it somehow. And I felt all bad. But I didn't tell my mom about that either, because I didn't want to go to the doctor. You know? I guess I didn't have it. I don't know. Let's see what to read. I got a lot of stuff. Let me get my watch off so I can watch the clock. I want to keep. How about I read you? I told somebody at the brown bag today I would read a hamster story. I'll read a hamster story to y'all. You may never have had a hamster story read to you before. Yep. This is from my book collection, Zombie Sharks with Metal Teeth. I need my glasses. Am I talking into this thing enough? Y'all can hear me back there? All right. Because my therapist asked me to tell a story using hamsters. Bedtime in the cage. Our mommy hamster would sit in the hall between my sister's wire room and my wire room and read us wonderful stories. We could see her just a little, sitting there in the chair she dragged over, and we would lie at the edge of our beds facing the door, making sure she hadn't scampered away to the dishes or the food bowl or to her bed of newspaper. Sometimes, too, through the walls, we could see the shape of our father hamster walking on all fours, smelling of each thing, and then whipping his face away, disgusted, but coming back to smell again and again. It was our mommy hamster's voice that carried us into sleep each night, though. The last thing we'd see would be her fuzzy, backlit shape in her chair. On the best nights, we could stay awake long enough for her to fall asleep as well, the corner of her book gnawed into a soggy mess. Then, every time the cage rattled and we shook awake, there she'd be in her same place, and we could go back to sleep again because the world was all right. But, as she told us each night before reading, she had a lot of stuff to do before bedding down herself. And when she said it, her whiskers would flick back towards the living room, giving away the source of her twitchy nerves, Father. She wouldn't tell us the story, but we knew from an aunt that when we were born, Father had tried to eat us. If we ever told Mommy we knew this, she would have just hushed us, told us that it was all a big misunderstanding. That's not the way daddies act, is it? So, of course, we never told her. It would have hurt to hear her have to lie. And even though the plea was there in her voice each night for us to go to sleep early this time so she could do her chores, still, her voice, we never wanted to let it go. We don't blame her, is what I'm trying to say. What she did, finally, was when we'd start to nod off while she was reading, just our nose moving, but to no place in particular, she'd take one of her old jackets, a few armfuls of loose paper from the corner, and some of the colored string that had been dropped down through the ceiling for us to play with, and fashion a surrogate for herself, a dummy mommy, One that, our eyes still thick with sleep and the lights off anyway, the only sound Father working the ball in the drinking tube we could mistake for her. Or not question before falling back to sleep anyway. The weeks after she started doing that, we slept better than ever, like we were curled around ourselves twice and then had enough energy that we were chewing up all the papers before Father could even get to them. It was a dream. And Mommy even lost that frantic look around her eyes a little. She was finally getting to the dishes, the bedding, all the things she needed to do but never had been able to. It was the perfect solution until we found the dummy Mommy in the hall closet. Billy loved her too, the real one. We're beginning to have a sense of what she was going through in the cage night after night, day after day, week after week. So we allowed the charade to continue. Each night while she read, we would chant to ourselves in our head, either that it was a dummy Mommy reading, or that was all right, just don't think about the mouth. Or if that wasn't working, we'd pray that when we woke in the night, we'd have forgotten that it wasn't really her sitting there. Like all good games of pretend, though, there came a night where what happened, and I've never told my sister this because I love her too, but what happened is that I woke, not from a sound, but a sense. It was Father. He was creeping along the wall in the next room, his nose to the corner, following it like a rat. Through the wire wall, I could only see his general outline, but it was enough for me to know the look he had on his face. It was the same one I'd imagined 100 times, the same one I knew he'd had the day we were born. But it was okay. We weren't furless pups anymore. The instinct had to be drained out of him, right? Somewhat. He wasn't after us was the thing. I settled my eyes on Mommy Hamster just as he got to her, just as he stood on his hind legs, his forepaws clamped onto her dry shoulder, his pelvis thrusting over and over into the side of her head, her ear. And she just took it. And then I remembered it was a thing of straw he was abusing, a dummy made from string, made to take her place. I smiled. 2 floors up, through the wire so that she was just the dimmest of shadows, I could see our Mommy Hamster. She had paused for a moment in the mouth of one of the great tubes that went forever away. Paused to check the air, to check on us. Go, I whispered to her in my loudest quiet voice. Run away. And slowly at first, but then faster and faster, so that her claws were clacking on the plastic, she did. I guess it's not a happy hamster story. I probably won't write children's books with hamsters. How much time I got? I've got about 25 minutes left. All kinds of stuff I want to do. How about, this is a really recent one. A real recent one I wrote. It looks like it's a lot of pages, but I print at 14-point font, so it's not that big. It's called Love is a Cavity I Can't Stop Touching. When I was 14, I ate a cooked piece of thigh meat off my girlfriend, Sherry Wilkes. Back then, she was Sherry with an I, with a heart for the dot when she could get away with it. Now she's Sherry with a Y again, nearly 20 years later. I can still see the girl she was at 14, though. It's the eyes. All the women in her family have the same look. I ate a piece from her, she ate a piece from me. We never had sex either, maybe because we didn't have to after that. It was like we'd gone out of order, skipped the tenderness, gone straight to the part where we consume each other. We didn't make it long after that Thursday night, both our legs gauzed and bleeding. Not because of shame or regret, and it wasn't that awkwardness that follows the kind of intimacy we'd shared either. I think it was that we could see the dim shape of the next step, the next stage, the one that would leave us dead in our separate rooms, our suicides planned down to the minute, our bodies abandoned, like to prove we were meeting somewhere else. Screw this town. My leg turned up infected later that week. It was dinner. I remember green beans, but not whatever the main food was. And I was eating with one hand, my other hand on my pants leg, worrying that tender flesh in my thigh. Because my chair was right by my dad's, he was the one to pick up I was hurt, the one to ask me about it. I blurted out the first and most obvious thing that could explain a bite like that taken out of my leg. I told him it had been James Redemaker's dog. James had lived on our street for 2 years then. When his brother didn't come home from the war and his house was too empty, his mom argued his case for a dog. It was a lanky Irish setter, could clear the fence when it needed to, and it needed to a lot. I don't remember its name, or maybe it's buried in my head somewhere, I guess. Just every time I go looking for it, I want to call it by James's dead brother's name, and then I stop trying to remember anymore. Because this is the way it was in my town, the way it still is. My dad finished his dinner that evening after seeing the bloodied leg of my jeans he'd paid for, then took 2 beers from the refrigerator, held them together by the neck so they clinked the whole way down to James's. The 2 fathers drank their beer, discussed the matter in a way that made them squint and not look at each other, but really, the decision had been made the moment my dad said their dog had bit me. Mr. Redemaker backed his truck out, dragged James's big red dog into the bed, tied it to the spare so it wouldn't jump out and brain itself, and he and my father drove out past the city limits where he couldn't get in trouble for firing a gun. I don't remember the dog's name, no, but I remember James, watching his father's taillights fade into the dusk, then looking over to me, my leg bloody with a love pact I would never tell him about. Sherry's leg never got infected. That's because she went first, probably. We loved each other, see? Not like I love my wife, Alice. How I love Alice, that'll last until we're old and gray. It's already taken us through lost jobs and late nights, and it'll take us through hospitals and alcoholism and whatever else it needs to. Because it's a love that's quartered with muscle, a love built to last. How I love Sherry, though, Sherry with an I, that was white hot. Some nights, alone in my room in 9th grade, I thought it was going to burn me up, leave nothing but a pile of ash on my sheets for my mom to find. When we whispered forever to each other, it wasn't a promise, it was a dare. Now I know we weren't good for each other, of course, like healthy. The rational part of me knows that if we'd somehow managed to stay together in spite of ourselves, then, even at our age, there'd be domestic disturbance calls once or twice a month. And that would just be the part of our relationship making it into the public eye. Behind closed doors, I don't know. We would eat each other up. I guess it's as simple as that. It's better we stopped where we did. I can't deny that. But I also can't deny that one night, 2 14-year-olds locked in a type of one upmanship love that neither would ever feel again, that they did something they could never take back, that they would never want to take back. It started with a lie about the Thursday night junior varsity basketball game, the one they were each going to with different friends, not with each other. Instead of that game, they walked out into the woods with a knife, a coat hanger, with a roll of gauze to play a different game. They weren't holding hands. They weren't smiling. Love, it can be grim. It can be so grim it hurts. They walked out just past where any headlights would cut through the trees, and then they set down their implements and caught each other's eyes, like to see who would blink first. Neither of us did. Sherry had worn shorts. She'd always been smart like that. Because it's what the doctor did for vaccinations, I rubbed the spot on her thigh she'd already traced with a ballpoint pen. "You were supposed to bring alcohol," she said. "My mom would have noticed," I said. She was sitting down and I was sitting lower, taking a knee like Coach always said. This is how people propose and get proposed to. When she nodded yes, the collar of her shirt pulled up into her teeth to bite. I blew on the pale skin of her thigh, then carved into it. The same way when you're eating watermelon with a spoon, you go in a little, then scoop that red meat back up. My scoop was more ragged, but before the blood rushed in, it left the same kind of crater. And Sherry, she screamed. I would too, but it was through her teeth. It was through how hard she was biting into her shirt. She had the gauze balled in her hand and pressed down right when I was done, pressed down like trying to squash the pain away. The bite of her thigh I had in my palm was deep red, and the muscle had striation to it, and one side still had her skin still, and some peach fuzz on it, just enough. I held it in my hand while she carved on me, my pants pulled down to my ankles. Right before the blade went into my muscle, that was what I was worried about, how stupid I must look standing there in my underwear. Because she was a more delicate eater, she ran the fine edge of the blade up and down before cutting to shave the few long hairs off. It really did feel like a dog bite, one that wouldn't stop, one I couldn't beat away with my fists. We were both crying by the time it was done. This is how you know it's love. The next part was easy. We just skewered the 2 bites onto the coat hanger, roasted them under her lighter, taking turns because it kept heating up, burning our thumbs. We laughed because it was stupid that thumbs could matter after what we'd done to our legs. I didn't want it to. With the peach fuzz on the bite of her thigh, it curled up and smoked away. Next, just like we'd planned, we slid the meat off and we fed it to each other. I took the bite she offered all at once to show how little hesitation I was having about the whole thing, but Sherry had been raised better. She took 1 bite, her incisors just brushing the pads of my thumb. The meat was still red in the center. She swallowed, then took my wrist in her hand, guided the rest of the bite in, her eyes locked on me the whole while. When we limped out of those trees, we were different people than we'd been. It was nighttime now. Everybody was at the basketball game, watching the JV team lose again. There was no one to witness our transformation, no headlights to throw our shadows tall against the trees. No deer or raccoon considered us, then scurried away. The mosquitoes didn't make a tunnel for us to walk down. Maybe James's dog barked, I don't remember. Probably he did. He always was that fall. Really, by pointing him out to my dad, I was letting the whole neighborhood get some sleep at last. This is the thing you tell yourself alone in your bed after lights out, when it's too quiet to ever sleep again. The reason I was the one to get infected, I figure, it was that Sherry's blood was on that blade. I couldn't have cleaned it with a lighter, though. You don't clean the blade if you love someone. And I didn't throw that piece of her up, either. I've never thrown it up. One dusk, I walked into the mystery and the muscle of love, and I came back from that darkness holding a girl's hand, and I kissed her lightly on the lips before we parted ways, my fingertips to her hip, and I was aware of her musculature in a completely new way. The divot is still in my leg, the cavity, the well the tip of my finger knows so well. Sitting at my desk, I can rub my finger into it through my pants. Alice says it looks like a weakness in the muscle. I don't let her run her finger down into it, of course. I was a traitor once to James. I won't be to Sherry. Because our town is small, I see her once every couple of weeks, more in the summer. As near as I can tell, she doesn't wear shorts short enough to show her scar, and I never see her at the pool, and I stay until dark some nights. There's a couple of girls there, though. One's named Claire, the other's Clarissa. Girls with names like Sherry with an I, they do things like name their daughters with the same letter up front. Their eyes are just like their mother's. When they break the surface of the water after a dive, it's like Sherry's rising all over again in slow motion. And their thighs, high up on their thighs, dusted with golden hair. Some days I have to close my eyes. And some days when the pool closes because night is sifting in, some days I collect my towel and my lotion and I turn left after walking out the pool gate. Left, not right, which would be towards my house. There's 2 girls jumping from line to line of the sidewalk in front of me. They're walking into the darkness. The older one's 8, the younger one's 6. I'm just following to keep them safe, I tell myself. In my mouth, it's not watering. That would be wrong. Like love knows the difference. That won't be the last one I read. That's kind of a bummer to stop on, really, you know, I think, in a lot of ways, man. You know, always when I write stuff like that, I always think, all right, it's out of my head. I can be free now. I can go play with unicorns and stuff. But then something else just pops into my head, you know, that's just as bad. I don't know. It's not because I want it there. Man, so how about I read you another non-fiction-y piece. Let me get to it. You know, I read from I was reading at Tattered Cover in Denver, the big bookstore, and I rode the bus there because, you know, it's an hour from my house, and I thought it would be really efficient if I were to, instead of bringing books to read, if I just brought my Kindle and read from it at a bookstore, which is really stupid. I don't recommend anybody ever bring an e-reader to a bookstore to read. But I got my just desserts because sure enough, I got up there to fill my 45 minutes of entertainment, and there was a pretty big crowd. And sure enough, my Kindle like dies and will not resuscitate no matter what I do. So I didn't have any other material with me, so I had to stand up there and just BS for 45 minutes and just tell random stories that I happen to think of. And I don't know if I sold a lot of books. It was kind of fun, but you know, I don't know. It could have gone better, I think. All right, well, if I can ever get to this piece, I was almost there. So close. Hold on. Yeah. Almost. Sorry. Yeah, nope. Yeah, here it is. Boom. And I lost it. I see I shouldn't be using a Kindle now even. Maybe I should be doing something smarter. You know, I read on the Air Force Academy last week, and the Air Force Academy is only like an hour and a half from my place, from my house. So I was able to bring all my books with me, which I thought would be great, but it really sucks to carry around 22 books around a huge campus, as it turns out. But it was nice because I didn't have to play with my Kindle, anyways. All right, I'm finally there. This is this is not good. Oh, there may be water spilled up here now. Hold on. Maybe a towel. Maybe. I've got a bandana up here, but I don't want to get it all wet. You know? It's mostly contained. Well, it's getting less contained now. Hold on. It'll be better momentarily. Hold on, Allie got paper towels. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Man, you'd think with a bottle I wouldn't spill it, but so it goes. You know, one time I was doing a reading in Pennsylvania, and they did the thing where in the introduction they said everybody turn off their cell phones, and everybody's like so bored because of course they turn their cell phones off. And then I get up there to do my reading, and I'm reading, and a phone starts ringing, and I pretend to ignore it, you know, and then it keeps on going, and I realize, oh no, it's my phone. My phone was ringing, and then I pull it out to turn it off, and it's my editor calling, you know. So I had to I answered and told her I'm doing something important, and then I went back. It was really a stupid situation. So now I'm always really fastidious, or whatever, fastidious is the wrong word. When the speaker up here says turn your phones off, I'm always the first one to do it like 6 times, you know. This is from my book, Growing Up Dead in Texas, which has a narrator in it called Stephen Graham Jones, which sounds a lot like me, and all of his experiences are kind of mine, but I still call it a novel, because some of it didn't happen, you know. This was me still trying to figure out nonfiction, really. And what I found out when I got into this novel and I realized it was going to take a nonfiction-y kind of shape, I hit all my friends up. I said, y'all feed me some good nonfiction. I need to understand how nonfiction works. And so they gave me a lot of good books. Man, I just devoured them all, and they were amazing and wonderful, and they didn't help me even a little bit, because they just don't. What finally cued me into what I considered, or what I realized or suspected, was the structure of nonfiction. It was that I DVR'd every episode of Monster Quest off the History Channel that I could. Do you know Monster Quest? That's where they go out looking for Bigfoot, and you always know they're not going to find Bigfoot because we would have heard about that by now, you know. So this episode is going to end with another close call that doesn't actually pan out, you know. But the structure of each one of those episodes, it starts out with a dramatic recreation, like you see a shape going through the woods or running off a porch or something, and then it cuts to an eyewitness standing there telling about that shape that ran and how it was crazy and I was so scared. And then it cuts to some dude in some doctor in a lab coat pouring stuff in test tubes saying, yeah, we're testing the hair. And then it goes back to a further recreation of a different scene in the same area, and it just kind of repeats that pattern over and over. And that actually helped me write nonfiction. It made me, because that felt to me like how you tell a nonfiction story in a way that engages the reader's interest, or has some tension in it, or some mystery, some surprise, some discovery, which are all things I want in things I read, definitely. Really what I figured out is that fiction works like fiction is like a line of dominoes. Like you tip over that one domino, the catalyst, and things start falling down in causal order, you know? Whereas nonfiction seems to be like there's a Death Star in the middle, and there's all these X-Wing fighters all around it shooting lasers, shooting photons, or whatever they call it in Star Wars land into it, you know? And that Death Star is the question, the central issue that this nonfiction wants to engage, and it's coming at it in different angles, trying to figure it out, trying to crack into it, and that's how I think nonfiction works. I could be way wrong. Some of y'all probably write nonfiction and actually understand it, but me coming at it from a fiction world. That's how I understand it. So I wrote this book, Growing Up Dead in Texas. This is a piece that's, I don't know, it's probably 40% into the book. What you need to know in it, I think one thing that's mentioned in here is a bottle of aftershave. And that's referring to a different part of the book where, this happened to me. Like, used to when I was a kid, you know, you get brushed out of the house. Your mom, dad tells you to go play, don't come back till it's full dark, you know, that kind of thing. And so in West Texas, you go out into the mesquite and the scrub and the cotton fields, and you come up with adventures, you know. And I was out doing that one day, and I ranged out further than I usually did, and found this old leaned over kind of tack shed. It looked like a tack shed, like where you keep saddles and stuff, but it was pretty broke down. And so I creeped up in there, and inside it turned out somebody had been living in there, and they had cleaned off one wall really well, and they had drawn a really, really detailed blue ink floor plan diagram of a prison, of a jail. And I was like, that scared me. I was like 11, 12 years old, you know. I thought surely this big-time criminal, now that I knew about his or her hideout, was going to come to my house and kill my whole family, you know. And I thought, what can I do, what can I do? And so I kind of backed out of there slowly. And then leaving by what used to be the gate post, I think. It was just a locust wood post stuck in the ground. It was weird. There was a bottle of Menen's aftershave, I think it was. Yeah, Menen's aftershave. And it was like new, like it had fallen out of an airplane or something. It was not open at all. And I knew instantly that what I had to do was get that bottle and crack it open and drink the whole thing all at once. And I drank all that aftershave in trade to the world, that if I could keep that aftershave down, not throw it up, then that criminal wouldn't come to my house and kill my family, you know? And it worked too, because my whole family lived for the rest of that year, you know? So this is well, this is a story my dad used to tell me when I was growing up. One of the stories my dad used to tell me about basketball was a tournament he played in high school. Stanton was up against one of the even smaller schools, the ones that don't exist anymore, that driving out on some narrow, unmaintained road, you can still stumble across like the ruins of some unrecorded civilization. The gym a Quonset skirted in brick, its metal doors chained shut, that floor space not reclaimed by senior citizens because the roof's not stable enough anymore. I used to find them all the time for hundreds of miles in any direction I went. This game my dad would tell me about, it was one of those small gyms. One of those small gyms, probably one of the ones I saw even, where the walls of the place were, except for one side, where the shallow stands were, almost right at the base and sidelines. So you didn't dive out of bounds to save the ball like you can now with extra room. Except for once, that is, this particular game. A player from the other team, a player who'd spent hours and hours in that gym, had grown up in it likely, knew every dead spot, all the angles. What happened was the ball was careening down for the baseline, and because there was no air conditioning for a place that large, and it was night anyway, the single doors at both ends were chalked open. What he did then, what he knew to do, had probably done 100 times in practice, was plant a foot at the baseline and jump, reaching for the ball, all his momentum aimed to carry him through that open door. An instant later, the ball would come slinging back and the crowd would erupt. The best magic trick ever, how heroes are made. The only difference, and I'm not even sure I'm not being lied to here, the only difference this time was that this player wasn't moving at practice speed, but at game speed, where things count. He planted like usual, jumped, got his palm on the ball just as it was slipping out the door, but he was moving too fast, went too high enough that his face connected with the top of the door frame, acted as a hinge for the rest of him folding out into the night. No ball came back, no player. By the time everybody followed, he was just laid out. There was nothing they could do, breathing, but bleeding chunky gouts from the mouth with each breath. It was only after they'd carried him away to somebody's station wagon, the 2-row stands emptied, that one of the Stanton players jerked his hand back from the door frame he'd been hanging on to lean out, watch these strange goings-on. The knocked-out player's 2 front teeth were up there, buried in the wood. Yeah, I don't know. I've been in those gyms, though, through the windows with the grates folded up just enough, and I can see where a story like that might have happened once. Some teeth lost anyway. Then got improved in the retelling, told around here like it was true. told to me like it was gospel, the most amazing thing ever, a lesson even that some balls aren't worth going after. The gym I grew up in, the old gym in what used to be the main part of Greenwood, it was a Quonset too, though with more room around it. Not enough to dive through, but enough for cheerleaders anyway, if they were careful, kind of kicked to the side. The lights took something like 15 minutes to heat up. One time, kicked out of the school I'd been trying to go to for a couple of weeks, I sneaked back, lucked my way through the halls of Greenwood and hid in that gym, shooting baskets in the dark until my old math teacher zeroed in on the dribbles I couldn't help, the clock always counting down from 10. Just stood there in the doorway and told me, her voice not even raised, that I was wasting all my potential, that I didn't have to do this. That could be anything, that other kids would kill to have what I had. The usual story, I'd heard it before, from Miss Everett, from Miss Easton, would get it in the way Godfrey looked at me that last semester before I was supposed to have graduated. I'm not mad at her for it. When Miss Morag told me that, I mean, she was probably younger than I am now. I don't know. As to why I came back there instead of the 1,001 more places I could have gone, it has something to do with that basketball tournament after the fire, I suspect. After that morning, basketball was sacred, a holy act. You were pure just because you played. But it also had something to do with my uncles telling me in the 4th grade to look on the wall for their initials. It took until the 6th grade, when the pegboard was a hot thing, but I finally found them up high on the wall like they'd carved them in their day. It felt good rubbing my fingertips over those grooves, those scars, because they'd been just as stupid as I was being. I mean, here was the proof. But they'd made it through somehow, got away. Maybe I would too. Maybe this was all part of it. I was a long way from that shed I'd found anyway, a long way from just drinking sudden aftershave. Here I am though, right? Because of, I don't know, according to Miss Godfrey, it's to write all this down, to be that player disappearing into that square of night, slinging the ball back that can save the game once and for all. I kind of doubt it. You know, I wrote that story for a workshop, a grad workshop I was teaching, and I always make my classes, the first day of class, I tell them, in addition to all the stories you're going to be writing this semester, you're also going to write a novel. And if you don't write the novel, you fail the class. And that bums them out a little bit at first, and more as the semester progresses. But this class is my first class of teaching in Colorado. In Texas, when I told students that, they were like, well, this sucks, but here we are, we're going to do it. When I got to Colorado and told them that, like, they looked at each other and then they all raised their hands, and they had like 1,001 excuses why they couldn't write a novel in 15 weeks, you know? And I insisted to them that they could. I've written novels in 3 days. I said, you can do it so fast if you just really try. And they insisted that this was impossible, and so I made a deal with them. I said, I'll go home this afternoon, I'll start a novel. If I don't finish that novel before the semester's over, then y'all are all released from your assignment. You don't have to do it either, you know? So I went home that night and started this novel, but I had no novel ideas, and I had little enough novel ideas that I just used my own name for the main character. You know, I didn't have time to lie and make things up, which is why it ended up like it is, I think. Oh, and also that class talked me into allowing them also to escape that project if they got a piece published that semester. And so what I ended up with was every person but one getting a story published in that class. So I only had one student write a novel, me and one student. And the one student who wrote a novel, she was the one poet I'd let in the class. And so she outshined all the fiction writers. It's pretty cool. I'll close with, I lost my glasses. Oh, they're not even wet. This story, it's called Neither Heads Nor Tails. And then we can open it up for any questions, discussion, whatever. My father lost his left nipple in a hunting-related accident. He said it didn't make him any less of a father. It made him more of a man, really. What happened was it was still hot 2 weeks before bow season opened, and he was in the garage in his undershirt, limbering up his favorite bow. After a couple of half draws to get the limbs warm, he pulled the string back all the way, no arrow, and held it for a steady 10 count. On 11, though, his shaky fingers let the bowstring slip. It sliced forward like razor wire. His nipple spun through the air, slapped the wall of the garage, and stuck. The way he tells it, he kind of grunted a smile then. The nerves in his new cavity were still too shocked to relay anything up to his head, and walked directly inside, cupping his hand over his chest to keep the air out. By the time he got a towel and made it back to the garage, which he'd had open, Telly, our golden retriever, was sitting there, sweeping the concrete with his tail. My father could see that what Telly was trying to do is what he always did when he was guilty, gulping down his smile. There was still a wet smear on the wall where he'd licked the nipple off. It didn't make him any less of a dog, my father says. Really, it made him more of a dog, probably. It's not like they could have sewn it back on anyway, right? And risk getting it back on, but rotate it half around now like a dial? No, and anyway, my father and his nipple stump, does it make me any less of a son for staring at it when we're at the beach? Oh, that, my mom says when she sees the fascination in my face, and then tells my father to be sure and get the sunblock down into that, dear. That's the kind of place a cancer will just pool if you let it. Because it's easier to play along, my father dollops the sunblock in, around, and after it's slicked, then we're all just lying there in the sun waiting to get dry enough for the drive home. I'll sometimes cue into my father's right hand, slapped across his chest like there's a flag in the area, but there's not. And he's asleep anyway, his right finger just skating around the oily rim of his caldera of scar tissue, that divot in his life. What it does, and this is the part I mostly hate, is make me sneak touches up into my own chest. Sneak touches and maybe even a light pinch, just to be sure. At least until my mom slaps the back of my hand and hisses not in public to me. It doesn't make me any less of a man, I don't think, but it doesn't help either. Thank you. I guess I didn't even realize it. The first story, did I read Love is a Cavity, that eating each other thing? I read that first, and then I ended with another body part gone. Huh. Maybe I just have a lot of stories like that. I don't know. So do you have any questions, anything to talk about? Yes?
Well, not to complicate your whole relationship to genre further, but listening to those short pieces, has anyone ever suggested to you that they're also like prose poems?
Yeah, that one I read, that lunch one about being in the cafeteria, that was published as a poem in 32 poems, I guess. A lot of them have shown up as poetry. What happens is I mail them into a fiction editor at a magazine, a journal, or somewhere, and then they say, well, take it, and then it shows up in the poetry section. I'm like, wow, I wrote a poem. You know, I didn't realize that. But I wish I could think in lines. I mean, I can think in small paragraphs, but thinking in lines just is not an ability I have, you know.
Except you had the piece where you had those 12 something
Yeah.
about a novel. That's
Yeah.
it,
Yeah, I guess so. That's like stanzas or something. I never thought about that. I do a lot of those bullet point stories, too. That's my most natural form of story, I think, is bullet point. Like, every time I tell a story, I have to resist doing another bullet point story, you know? Yeah. What else? Anything else? Y'all don't have to have stuff. I mean, we can go eat food if y'all need to. But
Well, while they're thinking of
Yeah.
your questions, what's your preoccupation with pirate shirts?
oh yeah, I think they're so cool. I mean, why not dress dramatically if you can dress dramatically? You know, I mean, if you could see my closet, you would understand the truth of that, or not the truth of it, but that I believe in it, anyways. Because I spend like, every time I have extra money, I go out and buy the most ridiculous loud shirt I can, that like Hank Williams Jr. would wear at a wet t-shirt contest or something stupid like that, you know. And I don't know, I like loud clothes. You know what I think it comes from, actually? I think I was programmed young because as a kid, there was not a lot of American Indian fiction for me to engage. So anything that showed up, I would just devour it and like consider it true, you know, like live by it kind of, because I thought that was the way it was. And I remember that the people who were always called half-breeds in the novels, they always dressed loudly. They always wore like big ribbon shirts, and you always knew the half-breed in the Western novel because he'd be the one with the big headscarf that was red and dramatic in the street, you know. And I think that I got programmed like that when I was like 11 years old, you know, as stupid as that is. But no, I would. If I could find pirate shirts, I would wear them constantly, I think. I'd love to wear tall leather boots and tuck my pants into them, too. But the problem is, when you tuck your pants into your boots, that's like telling everybody you want to fight, you know? And when I was 12, my biggest issue I had with growing up, I was reading a lot of Conan the Barbarian back then, was I knew without a doubt that I was going to be a Blue Angels pilot when I grew up, and then I was going to carry a broadsword. And I could not figure if I was going to carry my broadsword on my hip or on my back. And so I filled spirals drawing all these pictures of me as an adult with a sword on my back. And is that cool? And I'd show it to my mom and say like this, and she'd say, "You better think about it," you know. And I never figured it out, so I don't have a broadsword now. What else? Anybody got anything? Yeah, Allie.
So like there was also the story that we read for the brown bag that was about the rabbit story that was also about kind of consuming human flesh. Which,
I guess it is, yeah.
So that's like, you know, I mean the last story the last sort of story you read wasn't exactly about consuming flesh, but there was some kind of, and it seems like in the two examples, like they're both about like these kind of really intense relationships, like father-son is this one you read for the brown bag, and then this one is this kind of white-hot love and something about like consuming each other, or something about this relationship. I don't know. I was wondering if you could talk more about.
You know, I can tell you where that nipple story came from, anyways. I can't say for sure where love is a cavity comes from. Probably just girlfriends I had when I was 14, I suspect. But love is heads or tails comes from. Like when you don't play basketball all winter because it's too cold, then you go down to the park in like March or April and just play for the whole afternoon. What would always happen to me was I would limp home with just my feet were just nothing but blisters, you know? And so I did that one time, and I limped home, and I'm sitting there on the tailgate of my truck, and I took my shoes off, and I pulled a knife out of the glove compartment, and I was cutting off this big old like silver dollar sized blister from my foot because it was just hanging there, you know, it was all gross, and I knew it was going to mess me up. And so I cut it off, and I just flicked it out onto the driveway, and I was working on some other part of my foot or something. And then my dog kind of looks up, and she smells of that callous blister for a long time and looks at me. And then while she's watching me, she just slurps it right up, you know? And then she sits back on her haunches, and she chews that for so long. And it was so uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable to watch that thing eat a piece of you, you know? And that's where that story comes from anyways. But it could very well be that cannibalism or consuming each other is something I do a lot. I never had realized it, you know? I don't know.
That's weird because it's so striking.
It's part of the hamster story too.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Wow, I should do a collection of that or something. You know, my very first reading I ever did was this is the second reading I did. It was at Book People in Austin, Texas. And had, probably 18, 22 people, something like that there. And we got to the question and answer period like this, and this woman in the back raised her hand, and she said, "Why all the vomiting in your story?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And I kind of tried to stab around for an answer for a while, and then I didn't feel like I successfully answered her, but I did talk for a while anyways, and then it was over, and I moved to the next person, and they asked a question, I answered it, and then she raised her hand again, and I thought, wow, she's really a good reader. And what she asked was, "Why does everybody throw up in your stories?" And I was like, good grief. And so I tried to answer it again. And every other person was her asking the same question. And finally the staff had to remove her, guide her out. And but ever since then, every time I'm writing and somebody throws up, then I feel her hand go up in the back of my head.
Because it does occur in some of the same stories.
Yeah.
So,
Well, now you'll be raising your hand in the back of my head, every time somebody consumes. Anything else? Let's stare off. Let me think.
Okay, I have another
Yes, yes.
Are there, so I'm in Anishinaabe, and we have cannibal stories. Are there Blackfeet cannibal stories that maybe?
If there are, I don't know them, but I didn't grow up on the reservation, so I didn't, whenever I hear the stories, it's always like just an uncle or a cousin telling it to me now when I'm, probably 20, 30, 40, and they don't stick in the same way, so I don't remember them. I can think of some bloody Blackfeet stories, but I can't think of any cannibalism ones. I would guess there probably are, though. Yeah. I just missed out on them. Yeah. but I'm making them up anyways. So. All right. Well, one more. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't promise a good question, but I did notice. I mean, I think after you read Lunch,
Yeah.
You said, if I wrote that in a story, or I thought if I wrote that in a story, nobody would believe it. And it seems to me that that runs through most of the work that you're doing. I mean, the question of truth and all of that. But another striking thing you said was love. It can be grim. And so I'm thinking of the way these stories push against, sort of a sort of large wish about love stories of various kinds by making them very painful.
It could,
Talking.
it could be, or it could just be that. Well, let's see. I have this book coming out here in May. It's a werewolf novel called Mongrels, and one of my big gripes about werewolf fiction and werewolf movies is when the character the human transforms into a wolf and doesn't pay the price, of pain. And I would associate what you're saying, I think, like, yes, love is great, can be great, but it hurts too, It seems like that's like been the lesson I've always learned in my life, is that things can be great, but they're also going to hurt. You just got to push through anyways, Like playing basketball, one of the best games I ever played, I played it with a partially ruptured Achilles, and it was hurting terribly, but I think that sensitized me in a new way, or I couldn't jump, so I had to actually use my brain, which I never used playing basketball or something. I don't know what it was, but I do feel like there's always a price, though. Yeah, and you could, I never had considered that I was actually doing that on the page, but since I do believe it, I guess it makes sense, that I would be, yeah. And then after I partially ruptured my Achilles, I was 16 then. Then, what was it, 5-6 years ago, I ruptured it completely. And it's like a 4-month recovery, all surgery and screws and all the fun stuff. And then I went from wheelchair to walker to crutches to cane, and then I was finally walking on my own. Went to the doctor, and he said, "You're free. Your Achilles is bulletproof now. I put it together wonderfully." I was like, "All right, dude." And so I went home. The next day I got on my bike and I rode 3 houses down, and my Achilles ruptured again in a different place. So I had to do 4 more months of that recovery. I've got a story up here about that. I ran out of time to read it, but it's kind of bloody too, Yeah.
I got a question about process. When you started, you were saying, "Oh man, I feel naked without a pen," or it's even worse if you don't have a book.
Yeah.
But you're carrying a Kindle around.
I am.
I'm just wondering, in the creative process, do you use all media at all times, or do they intersect?
I do, yeah. Like I just now, I had 2 hours, I guess, between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock coming over here. So I went to the library and I wrote a story on my laptop there. And I try to keep it where I can write on anything, because I think if you ritualize your writing too much, or if you're superstitious about it, if you can only write when you're wearing this robe or with that candle burning, or if your desk is like this or in this room, then I think really what you're doing is you're giving yourself excuses not to write, Like I can't find my hat, so I'll just watch TV tonight, that kind of stuff. And I travel a whole lot, so I have to always remember that I can write anywhere and with whatever I need to, I guess. I write a lot in airports. I'm good at turning the world off, I say turning the world off. I'm good at ignoring responsibility, which I guess is turning the world off, Like some people write to, I don't know why they write. I think why I write, it seems like 95% of the time it's because I don't want to mow the lawn. But if I write, then I can go play with dragons instead, and I can put off mowing the lawn, I don't like chores, but I like going to dreamland and playing, But yeah, I've got 2 or 3 shelves at home just jam-packed with spirals because I used to always carry a spiral with me until a few months ago, and until I lost like the 2nd spiral in a row, so I thought I need a better system, But they're jam-packed with ideas for stories, but they're also totally useless because premises that's not where a story starts for me. It starts with a voice. You have to hear that first line, which gives you the angle of inflection, that it establishes the rules of exposition. Everything can be laid out with the proper angle, the proper voice. But So the premise never matters. Anymore, every story I write is for solicitation. Probably the last 3 or 4 years, an editor calls me up and says, "Hey, I'm doing a kittens in space anthology, and I want you to write the lead story for it." And I'll be like, "Well, I don't really know what a cat would do in space, And then they say, "Well, we'll give you 50 cents a word," and I'm like, "I'm having some ideas now, And so then I sit down and I start figuring out how to put big balls of yarn in orbit and all kinds of stuff. And what I find is content doesn't matter because the same story rises nearly every time for me, anyways. And it's nearly always a father-son story, Really, I think it's probably like that for most writers, that you really only have basically 1 or 2 stories, and you spend your whole career dressing it up in different ways. And I think that's what I'm doing anyways. I just have one father-son story to tell, and I just keep on telling it, trying to core down to the truth of it, or to something that's under it. I don't even know what yet, Well, thank y'all. I had a really fun time talking to you. It was fun.
So again, I'd like to invite everybody up to the 9th floor.